All right, today we're diving into a fascinating story. It's a high-stakes trade negotiation that honestly plays out more like a strategic chess match. We're talking about a massive wall, a really clever bridge, and believe it or not, how a single phone call helped change the entire game.
So this is the big question at the heart of it all. When you're up against a massive economic barrier, you can't just run at it with a sledgehammer, right? You need something more creative. You need a key to unlock the stalemate. And that is exactly what India went looking for.
And this really gets to the core of our story. On one side, you've got the problem, this huge imposing tariff wall put up by the United States, and on the other, India's pretty ingenious response. Not another wall, not a counterattack, but the construction of an oil bridge. Let's break down exactly what that means.
First, let's set the stage. We really need to understand the challenge here, because this wasn't some minor disagreement. This was a major economic standoff that was threatening to grind trade relations to a complete halt.
It all started when the U.S. administration under President Trump threw up this massive tariff wall. We're talking up to 50% on Indian goods. Now, this wasn't just a tax. It was a direct hit. It sent absolute shockwaves through supply chains and put this immense pressure on Indian businesses, who basically had to eat the costs just to stay in the game.
So why the wall? What was the reason? Well, a huge part of it comes down to this number, $42.7 billion. That was the trade surplus India had with the US, and President Trump saw that figure as just fundamentally unfair. From his point of view, India was selling way too much and not buying nearly enough.
So when you boil it all down, Washington's grievances really came down to two main things. First, that trade surplus we just talked about, but second, there was a whole geopolitical angle. See, the U.S. was not happy about India continuing to buy Russian crude oil. In this big, complex global chess game, that move was seen as helping out a rival. And when you combine those two issues, you get the perfect storm for a trade conflict.
So how did India respond? Faced with this giant wall, they didn't just build their own tariff wall in retaliation. No, instead, they made a really surprising and frankly, very strategic opening move.
And this was the bombshell. In a packed press conference, India's Commerce Minister, Rashesh Agrawal, just laid his cards right on the table with this public statement. This wasn't some vague promise, It was a concrete multi-billion-dollar offer, and it was designed to be heard loud and clear all the way over in Washington, D.C.
Now, the brilliance of this strategy was just how efficient it was. It was one move, but it was designed to hit two targets at once. First, offering to buy $15 billion more in U.S. oil directly tackled that trade surplus issue. It made the numbers look a whole lot more fair from the American perspective. And second, it sent this powerful diplomatic signal. It showed a real willingness to pivot energy purchases away from Russia and toward the U.S., a key strategic partner.
But get this, that incredible $15 billion offer? That was just the opening act. Behind the scenes, India was getting ready to reveal its full hand. A much, much bigger plan to totally reset the economic relationship.
The full offer was a massive $40 billion purchasing package. Yeah, the $15 billion in oil was the centerpiece for sure, but it was backed up by a proposal to buy another $25 billion in other American products, including some major defense contracts. This wasn't just a quick fix, it was a serious long-term commitment. And this whole strategy was built on three main pillars. First, and most obviously, was to drastically shrink that trade surplus with a big spending plan. But just as important, India also promised to improve market access for American companies and to start cutting through all the red tape that made doing business there so difficult. The goal was to create a real win-win.
Okay, so all the strategic pieces are on the board. The plans are in motion. But then, something happened that absolutely nobody could have predicted. Something that had nothing to do with tariffs or trade data, but everything to do with personal diplomacy.
The shift was just dramatic. I mean, for months, the relationship was all tension and stalled talks. And then came the turning point, a simple birthday phone call from President Trump to Prime Minister Modi. And it was like a switch flipped. The ice just broke. Negotiations that had been totally frozen for months were suddenly back on track, and with this completely new, positive energy.
And the results were plain to see. Shortly after that call, President Trump, who had been pretty critical, was now publicly calling Prime Minister Modi a very good friend and India a great country. For the negotiators on the ground, this was a total 180, signaling that the door for a real deal was finally wide open.
When you lay it all out like this, you can really see the diplomatic chess match that was playing out. For every single challenge thrown by the U.S., The tariff wall, the trade surplus, the Russian oil thing, the stalled talks. India had a really smart, carefully crafted response. It was honestly a masterclass in turning big problems into bigger solutions.
So what can we all learn from this? Beyond the big headlines and the billions of dollars, this whole episode is basically a playbook. It's filled with timeless lessons on strategy, on diplomacy, and on negotiation.
I think there are 4 key takeaways here. First, India spoke the language of its counterpart, right? They focused on big, concrete numbers and deals, not abstract economic theory. Second, they literally turned a wall into a bridge for a new energy partnership. They saw an opportunity in the obstacle. Third, they showed the incredible power of the personal touch. A simple birthday call did what months of formal meetings couldn't. And finally, none of this works without preparation. That $15 billion offer was believable because it was backed up by hard data on India's real capacity.
And really, that's what this story leaves us with. It shows that just pushing back, that confrontation, isn't always the only answer to a conflict. Sometimes, the most powerful move you can make is to find some common ground and then build something new on it. And that's a lesson that applies way beyond international trade, leaving us with one last thought. In a world that so often seems full of walls, what bridge will you build?